Your bodyguard is lying, sir. Be careful, please.
Sam Dean was 13 years old, and he had just watched a grown man lie with a straight face. It was a cold Tuesday morning in Chicago, the kind where the wind off the lake cuts through your jacket like it has somewhere to be. Sam was doing what he did every morning before school, running his shortcut through the alley behind Marsh Street, the one that saved him 10 minutes if he didn't mind stepping over a few trash bags and the occasional stray cat named Butter who lived behind the dry cleaner. That morning, Butter wasn't the only thing in the alley. Sam froze behind a stack of wooden pallets when he heard a voice he recognized. It was low, careful, the kind of voice people use when they don't want to be heard. He peeked around the pallets and saw a man in a black suit standing near the dumpster, phone pressed to his ear. The man was Derek Voss, 33 years old, white, built like he lifted weights for a living. Because he did. Derek Voss was a professional bodyguard, and not just any bodyguard. He was the personal head of security for Walter Kingston, one of the richest men in Chicago, maybe in the whole Midwest. Walter Kingston owned buildings downtown, a chain of hotels, and half of a football team. Sam knew him because everybody in the city knew him. You couldn't ride the L train without seeing his name on a billboard. Sam had seen Derek Voss before. Voss walked 2 steps behind Mr. Kingston every single day, scanning the street like a hawk, hand always near his jacket. He was supposed to be the reason nothing bad ever happened to Walter Kingston. But right now, in this alley, at 7:42 in the morning, Derek Voss was saying something that made Sam's stomach drop. He'll be there at 8:15, same coffee shop, same table by the window. 15 minutes, that's all the window we've got. After that he heads to the car, and it's too public. Voss paused, listening. No, I'll make sure I'm not around. Tell your guy to come through the side door of the shop, not the front. There's a camera on the front. Sam's heart was pounding so loud, he thought Voss might hear it from 30 feet away. He pressed himself flatter against the pallets, holding his backpack straps so tight, his knuckles went pale. Voss kept talking. Just make it quick. In and out. Nobody needs to get hurt except him. Except him. Sam didn't need a dictionary to understand what that meant. Somebody was planning to hurt, maybe kill, Walter Kingston. And the man planning it wasn't a stranger. It was the one man whose entire job was to protect him. Voss ended the call, slipped the phone into his pocket, and glanced around the alley like he was checking if anyone had seen him. Sam ducked lower, holding his breath, until his chest burned. He heard Voss's footsteps walk off toward the street, unhurried, like a man who had all the time in the world and nothing at all to hide. Sam counted to 20 before he moved. Marsh Street Coffee was 3 blocks from Sam's school, tucked between a barbershop and a bookstore that never seemed to have any customers except an old man who read magazines he never bought. Sam had never actually been inside Marsh Street Coffee. It was the kind of place where a cup of coffee cost more than his mum made in an hour cutting hair at the shop on 5th. But he knew it was Walter Kingston's favorite. Everybody in the neighborhood knew that. It was practically famous for it. Cars would slow down, just so people could see if they'd catch a glimpse of the billionaire walking in. Sam looked at the clock on his phone. 7:53. He had 22 minutes. He should have gone straight to a police officer. He knew that. But when he thought about it running through his mind, on the sidewalk, breathing hard, a 13-year-old kid running up to a cop and saying, "The billionaire's bodyguard is planning to have him killed," he could already hear how that would sound. They'd think he was making it up, or worse, wasting their time on some kind of prank. And by the time anybody believed him, it might already be too late. There was only one thing to do. He had to warn Walter Kingston himself. Sam ran. He wasn't the fastest kid in his grade. That was Marcus Lee, who ran track and had a medal to prove it. But Sam had grown up racing his older cousins down these same streets, dodging fire hydrants, and jumping over curbs like it was second nature. His backpack thumped against his spine as he ran past the barbershop, past a bus stop where a woman gave him a strange look, past a man sweeping the sidewalk in front of his shop, who yelled, "Slow down, young man." Sam didn't slow down. He reached Marsh Street Coffee at 8:09. Through the big front window, he could see him. Walter Kingston, sitting at his usual table, reading something on a tablet, a cup of coffee steaming in front of him. He looked exactly like he did on the billboards, except older somehow, more tired, like the suit he wore was heavier than it looked. Sam pushed through the door, chest heaving, and every head in the coffee shop turned to look at the panting kid, who'd just burst in like he was being chased. A barista started to say something about a line, but Sam didn't hear her. He walked straight up to Walter Kingston's table. "Mr. Kingston," Sam said, still catching his breath. "Sir, your bodyguard is lying to you." Walter Kingston looked up slowly, the way rich men do when they're used to being interrupted, and have learned patience is cheaper than anger. He studied Sam for a moment. A kid, maybe 13, backpack, school uniform sweater, out of breath like he'd run a marathon. "Excuse me?" Kingston said. "Derek, your bodyguard. He's lying about where he is right now." Sam's words tumbled out fast. "I saw him in the alley behind here, on the phone, telling somebody you'd be at this coffee shop, at this table, at 8:15. He told them to come in through the side door because there's no camera there. He said he wouldn't be around when it happened." The two other men sitting near Kingston, Sam hadn't noticed them before, but now he saw they were also security. Younger guys in plain jackets, exchanged a look. Kingston set down his tablet. "Son, that's a serious thing to say about a man who's worked for me for 6 years." "I know," Sam said. "I know how it sounds, but I heard him. I was right there. He said 15 minutes, that's all the window we've got, and nobody needs to get hurt except him." "He meant you, sir." "I think he means for somebody to hurt you. Right now, right here." For a second, nobody moved. The coffee shop had gone quiet enough that Sam could hear the espresso machine hissing behind the counter. Then Kingston did something Sam didn't expect. He didn't laugh, and he didn't call Sam crazy. He looked at his watch. It read 8:11. "Where's Voss now?" Kingston asked one of the other security men, his voice suddenly sharp, all the tiredness gone from it. The man reached for his radio. "He said he was checking the perimeter route to the car, sir. Said he'd meet us out front at 8:15. "Check again," Kingston said. The man spoke into his radio. No answer. He tried again. Still nothing. Kingston's jaw tightened. He looked back at Sam. "What's your name?" "Sam. Sam Dean. Sam Dean." Kingston repeated it slowly, like he was memorizing it. "How old are you?" 13. "And you're telling me you overheard my head of security planning something against me, in an alley, this morning, on your way to school?" "Yes, sir." Kingston looked at the two security men. Something passed between the three of them, a decision being made without words. One of them stood up immediately and moved toward the side door Sam had mentioned, hand resting on his own jacket. The other pulled Kingston up from his chair, gently but firmly, guiding him away from the window. "We're moving. Now," the standing man said. That was when the side door opened. The man who came through the side door wasn't dressed like a customer. He wore a grey hoodie pulled low over his face, hands stuffed deep in his pockets, in a way that made every hair on Sam's arms stand up. He scanned the room fast, too fast, like he was looking for one specific person and didn't care about anyone else. His eyes landed on the table where Walter Kingston had been sitting seconds before. It was empty. The man's head snapped up, searching, and that's when he saw Kingston being hustled toward the back hallway by his security. His hand came out of his pocket. "Down! Everybody down!" one of the security men shouted, and the coffee shop exploded into chaos. Chairs scraping, people screaming, someone knocking over a display of coffee mugs that shattered across the floor. Sam didn't remember deciding to move. His body just did it. He grabbed the edge of a nearby table and flipped it onto its side, more out of instinct than any plan, and ducked behind it as a shot rang out, splintering the wood of the doorframe where Kingston had been standing just a heartbeat before. The security man who'd moved toward the door tackled the shooter before a second shot could be fired. They crashed into a display case, glass and coffee beans spraying across the floor, the gun skittering away under a table. Screams turned into shouting. Shouting turned into the sound of sirens somewhere outside. Sirens that must have already been called in by someone, the moment the first shot went off. It was over in less than 30 seconds. The security man had the shooter pinned to the ground, knee in his back, shouting for someone to call the police, even though the sirens outside meant they were already coming. Sam peeked out from behind the overturned table, ears ringing, heart slamming against his ribs. Across the room, Walter Kingston stood pressed against the back wall, unhurt, staring at the man in the grey hoodie being held down on his coffee shop floor. Then Kingston's eyes found Sam. He crossed the room in a few long strides and crouched down in front of the overturned table, right at Sam's level. "You're okay?" Kingston asked. His voice had lost all its rich man calm. It shook a little. Sam nodded, though his hands were shaking too. "You saved my life," Kingston said. "Do you understand that? If you hadn't come running in here..." He stopped, like the thought was too much to finish out loud. The police arrived within minutes, and with them came more questions than Sam had answers for at first. His name, his age, where he lived, what exactly he'd seen and heard in that alley. A police officer named Detective Renee Ford, a black woman with sharp eyes and a notepad she filled fast, sat with Sam on a bench outside the coffee shop while paramedics checked him over, mostly for the scrape on his elbow from diving behind the table. "Walk me through it again," Detective Ford said, not unkindly. "From the beginning," Sam told her. "The alley," Derek Voss's voice. The words he'd used. "He'll be there at 8:15. Same table by the window. Side door. No camera. Nobody needs to get hurt except him." He repeated it exactly, because he'd been running the words over and over in his head the whole time he ran. Like if he forgot even one of them, nobody would believe the rest. "And you're sure it was Voss? You saw his face?" "Yes, ma'am. I've seen him before. He's always with Mr. Kingston. I see him almost every day walking to school." Detective Ford wrote something down, then looked over her shoulder toward a police cruiser where Derek Voss was sitting in the back seat, hands cuffed, face pale and blank, saying nothing to the officers around him. He'd been picked up 2 blocks away, walking calmly toward a parked car that wasn't his own. A car that, it would later turn out, had a second man waiting inside it. Meant to be a getaway driver who lost his nerve and drove off the second he heard sirens, leaving Voss behind on the sidewalk. "He didn't even try to run," Detective Ford muttered, almost to herself. Then she turned back to Sam. "You know, most grown men wouldn't have done what you did. Most of them would have called it in and let somebody else handle it." "I didn't have time," Sam said. "I thought if I didn't get there fast enough..." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Detective Ford studied him for a long moment, the kind of look adults give kids when they're trying to figure out if what they're seeing is really as brave as it looks, or if the kid just got lucky. Whatever she decided, she nodded slowly and closed her notepad. "You did good, Sam Dean," she said. "Real good." Walter Kingston didn't leave in his car that morning. Not right away. Instead, he sat down across from Sam on that same bench, ignoring the aides and lawyers already buzzing around him on their phones, ignoring the news vans that had somehow already started pulling up across the street. "I need to ask you something," Kingston said. "And I need you to be honest with me." Sam nodded. "Voss has worked for me for 6 years. He's had 100 chances to hurt me if that's what he wanted. Why now? Why today?" Kingston wasn't really asking Sam. It was the kind of question a man asks out loud when he's still trying to make sense of a thing that doesn't make sense yet. But Sam answered anyway, because it was the one part of the whole morning he'd actually thought about while he was running. "Maybe it wasn't about you at all," Sam said. "Maybe somebody paid him a lot of money, and he just said yes." Kingston was quiet for a moment. It turned out, days later, that Sam wasn't far off. Investigators found that Voss had been deep in gambling debt, owing money to people who didn't accept late payments as an answer, and someone had offered to make the debt disappear in exchange for one morning of looking the other way at exactly the right moment. It wasn't complicated. It wasn't some elaborate secret plot years in the making. It was just a man who ran out of good choices and made a very bad one instead. But in that moment on the bench, Kingston just nodded, slowly, like the 13-year-old sitting next to him had said something worth thinking about. "You know what the strangest part is," Kingston said. "I trusted that man with my life every single day. I never once thought to question him. And you, a kid I've never met, who has no reason to care whether I live or die. You're the one who ran 3 blocks to save me." "I didn't think about it like that," Sam said. "I just didn't want somebody to get hurt because I stayed quiet." Kingston looked at him for a long moment, and something in his face softened, like he was seeing something in Sam that reminded him of somebody else, maybe himself a long time ago, before the buildings and the billboards and the bodyguards. "Where do you go to school, Sam?" "Douglas Middle, few blocks from here." "And your parents?" "It's just me and my mum. She cuts hair over on 5th Street. Kingston nodded slowly, filing that information away, the way rich men do when they're already thinking 3 steps ahead. "I'd like to meet her, if that's all right with you." By that afternoon, the story was already spreading through the neighborhood, faster than Sam could keep up with. Kids at school had heard some version of it before he even walked through the front doors, that Sam Dean had stopped an assassination, that he'd tackled a gunman with his bare hands, that he'd been given a reward of $1 million on the spot. None of it was quite right, but Sam didn't bother correcting anybody. He just wanted to get through the school day and go home. His mother, Denise Dean, had gotten a call from the police before Sam even made it home, and when he walked through the door of their apartment, she pulled him into a hug so tight it nearly cracked his ribs, somewhere between furious and terrified and proud all at once. "You could have been shot," she said into his shoulder, voice trembling. "I know, Mum. You could have just told a teacher, or me, or anybody." "I know, Mum." Sam hugged her back just as tight. "I didn't have time to think it through. I just ran." She pulled back and looked at him, really looked at him, like she was checking for something she couldn't quite name. Then she shook her head, half a laugh escaping even with tears still in her eyes. "You are something else. You know that?" 2 days later, a black car pulled up outside their apartment building. The same kind of car Sam had seen driving Walter Kingston around the city his whole life. Except this time, it stopped for them. Kingston stepped out himself, no security trailing behind him this time, except a new bodyguard, an older man named Marcus Whitfield, who Sam would later learn had been vetted for 3 straight days before Kingston trusted him near his coffee cup, let alone his life. Kingston sat at their small kitchen table, in an apartment that could probably fit inside his office closet, and drank a cup of coffee Denise Dean made him, and told her that her son had more courage than most grown men he'd ever met. "I want to do something for him," Kingston said. "For both of you." "You don't owe us anything," Denise said. "He did what was right. That's all." "That's exactly why I want to do it," Kingston said. "Because he didn't do it expecting anything back." What came of that conversation wasn't a headline-grabbing fortune, no matter what the rumors around the neighborhood claimed. It was something quieter, but it changed things all the same. A full scholarship set up for Sam, all the way through college, and a smaller fund started for kids at Douglas Middle who needed help with things like school supplies and winter coats, and the kind of costs that never make the news but make all the difference to a family getting by. Kingston named it simply the Alley Fund. He said the name was Sam's idea, though Sam always insisted Kingston had come up with it himself. Derek Voss was formally charged 2 weeks later, along with the man in the grey hoodie and 2 others connected to the plot, including the debt collector who had offered to erase Voss's gambling debt in exchange for 15 minutes of looking away. At his hearing, Voss said almost nothing except that he was sorry, a word that didn't mean much to anybody in that courtroom, least of all to the man he'd been paid to protect and had instead nearly let die. Sam didn't go to the hearing. Detective Ford had told him he didn't need to, that his statement from that morning had already done its job. He went to school instead, sat through math class like normal, ate lunch with his friends like normal, and when Marcus Lee asked him for the 10th time that week if it was true he'd really run 3 blocks to save a billionaire's life, Sam just shrugged and said, "I just didn't want to see somebody get hurt when I could have stopped it." It sounded simple when he said it like that. Maybe that's because it was. Walter Kingston still walked past Marsh Street Coffee sometimes, though he changed his routine now, varied his tables, kept his new bodyguard closer than his old one ever stood. Every so often, if Sam was walking that same shortcut through the alley, on his way to school, he'd catch Kingston's car slowing down near the corner, and the old man would roll down his window just long enough to give Sam a small wave, like two people sharing a secret nobody else in the world would ever fully understand. Because that's what it came down to, in the end. Not the money, not the news vans, not even the scholarship. It came down to one ordinary morning when a 13-year-old boy heard something he wasn't supposed to hear, and instead of staying quiet, he ran. And because he ran, a man who had every reason in the world to feel safe, surrounded by money, by guards, by all the protection a person could buy, learned that sometimes the only thing standing between him and disaster wasn't the man he paid to watch his back. It was a kid with a backpack, cutting through an alley on his way to school, who simply refused to look away.